I think selective adjustments are the most powerful tool when it comes to Lightroom, when it comes to editing in general. That is why I'm always so heavy and so hardcore on selective adjustments, because it is something you absolutely 100% need to learn and build into habits when you edit. G'day, how's it going? Hope you're having a shit one. Today we're learning how to get that nice, luscious brown, autumn, fall, whatever you want to call it. A really nice Instagram look. A little bit of fade in it, crushed blacks, this sort of style. How do you do it? I'm so sorry to interrupt the video, but I just wanted to let you know that it's Black Friday and all of my presets are 50% off. And on top of that, we have a new photo comp and raffle happening. If you want to know how you can win one of these insane prizes, there's a link in my description that gives you all the details. So I think the biggest thing right now is the crop. So I definitely don't need all of this image right here. So I'm going to crop it in a bit. I still want a little bit of the sky, which we're going to try and pull back a little bit. Now, the first thing I like to do as soon as I get any raw photo, any one of my photos in, I just like to take all the highlights down, the shadows up, the whites down, and the blacks up to give me an idea of what I'm working with. The next thing I'm going to do is start to work on the tone curve. So I'm going to come in here, you have your highlights, your midtones, and your shadows. Probably about here, about halfway up the midtones, and bring it up a little bit. And I'm gonna actually flatten my highlights a little bit as well, something like that. And I'm gonna bring some shadows down and then a little bit of fade, which you can do by bringing up the shadows here. Now, obviously this looks disgusting, but this is pretty much how every one of my photos starts. The next thing I'm gonna do is go Shift M, and I'm gonna bring up a radial filter, and I'm gonna create a big radial filter from the top here to act as essentially a big softbox. From the top of our image, I want the light to fall down onto our subject here. So I'm gonna bring up my exposure a little bit and maybe a touch of saturation. So let's just fix our whole basic adjustment now. I'll bring my shadows back in. I like to do a lot of selective adjustments, so I'll try and keep it as simple as possible. Create a new mask, select subject. Now, this has done a pretty shocking job of selecting our subject. Thank you, Lightroom, but we can come back and fix that. So I'm gonna create one subject mask for the car, and I'm actually gonna create another subject mask, and I'm gonna invert it so it's affecting everything but the car, which has also done a shocking job. So I'm gonna subtract everything we don't need, because I'm actually gonna rename this to not car. You can rename it to whatever you want if you even like to rename your files. I usually don't, just for the sake of this tutorial and sounding like I know my shit. I better just do that. So anyway, we're coming to our not car here. Let's just turn off our car mask as well for now. And we're gonna hit subtract. And inside the subtract, we'll hit the brush so we can get very detailed with what we don't want in the picture here. Nice one. Let's turn that off for now. We'll turn our car mask back on and we'll fix that as well, because again, Lightroom did a pretty bad job. So I go add, which is the opposite of what we did. We're gonna add a mask, go back into the brush tool and just go over everything that the mask needs to hit on the car. For some reason, it didn't do like a full job on the front here, super random. And then we're gonna hold down Option on our keyboard, which brings up a subtract version of the mask. Oh my God, I got so much of the road. What is it doing? It's got like the half of the road here. So now that we've got two masks, one over our subject and then one that is affecting everything but the subject. So I like to do a lot of selective adjustments like this, because then I can be exact with what I want to affect in the image. So everything that isn't the car, I'm gonna bring the exposure down. And see how this really helps me right now? We're gonna go through and touch up a bit of the car as well, because it's affecting some of this. So we need to go back through and feather with some of the mask. I've got my mask here. I can really play with everything that isn't the car to create the effect I want. So I'm actually gonna bring the exposure down of my entire image. And now that I've got my car, I can bring my saturation out to get the original color back as well, which is nice. Let me just fix up the mask here quickly, because we've got a little bit of the corner here as well, which looks a bit ugly. But because I did take some saturation out of the car, it does also affect the headlights. So I'm also gonna come back into my brush tool here, lightly brush over the headlights here, and also a little bit on our badge here. I like to create a mask over the windscreen as well. And then once I've finished with this, I like to darken the exposure to create less distractions in the shot basically. And I just think it looks a whole lot cleaner. Hopefully that's not too much. Bang. There we go, happy with that. And another thing I like to do as well, especially in photos like this, when we have a road with yellow lines in it, I like to have a separate mask for that as well, so I can adjust the color and get the yellows right of just that part of the road too. So let me go over that as well with a brush tool. gonna add a little bit more purple hint to it. When you add a little bit more purple to already something that's yellow or orange, it really helps get a more darker orange rather than looking towards the yellow-green scale. If we look here, there's like different types of yellows, right? If you have a yellow that goes to more greens, and then you have the yellow that goes to more oranges. Me personally, I love the yellow that sits to more of the orange side more than the green side, because I think this always looks a bit yuck and gross. Whereas a yellow that plays into oranges and gets that nice dark orange, I prefer that a lot more. I think it's a lot more satisfying to look at. By adding a little bit more purple into it, you are forcing the white balance of it to go to more of those dark oranges. Next up, we can press M on our keyboard to bring up a linear gradient, and this is going to affect our road, which I'm gonna darken the exposure for and add a little bit of clarity to it and take out some saturation to it. And then I'm going to subtract our subject from it. Keep that nice and bright there. Next up, we're gonna do another selective adjustment. We're gonna press Shift M to create a radial filter. I'm just gonna collapse this for a second. And I'm gonna create it over this part of our image here. Something about there. I'm gonna increase our exposure a little bit. Probably come a bit more over the car a bit as well. And I'm gonna increase our saturation about 20%. Like I mentioned before on the road, when you already have something that's a little bit yellow or something that has greens in it, yellowy greens, we can add a little bit of purple tint to them to get them to move across to more of the darker orange. And then by also adding a warmer temperature into them, we're really gonna get more of that orange look. There's the before and after of that one mask. I'm gonna come back to our first original mask here, our softbox overhead, and increase the exposure a little bit on that as well, and bump the saturation a little bit more. And the same thing as before with that previous mask we just did, add a little bit more purple to it and a little bit more warmth. Back into our basic adjustments, I feel like the shadows could come down a little bit more and the highlights could come up a tiny bit. So let's do that. Drop the shadows a bit more, and a little bit of texture and clarity goes a long way. Remember the mask we made that affected everything that wasn't the car? We're gonna come back into that and we're gonna bring some color in, because I'm pretty happy with all the selective adjustments I've made now. And why we're gonna come back into this one is because I don't want the colors to affect my subject. And this is the same no matter what you're shooting, if you're shooting any sort of subject, especially more or less for car photography or portraiture. You don't wanna be affecting the rest of the image over the skin tones, and you don't want to be affecting the rest of the image over the color of the car. So color of car and skin tones sort of work in that same realm. I've been on Lightroom for so many years now, and this is a really groundbreaking thing for me. So we're in the selective adjustment of our car, and we have a tone curve in our mask that we're gonna use. And in that curve, we're gonna click the blue channel, and I'm gonna bring the middle part of the blue channel down ever so slightly. There's our before, there's our after. We're pretty much in the final stages now, and something I like to do is come into the color grading and just bump the luminance of our colors here a little bit. So in the highlights and in our midtones a little bit, just something like that, which I think just gives it a little bit of an extra oomph. I don't do it for the shadows because it creates a fade over the whole image, if you see that. I usually never bring it up because I usually use the fade in the tone curve. If anything, I'm gonna bring it down, but I'm not gonna touch it here. The last thing is we're gonna add a denoise on it. 40% is good, we're gonna enhance it there. And here we go. Here's the before shot and the original crop, and here is our after. And that is how you create that really nice, subtle orange glow for your autumn pictures.